Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of Amit's talk on Friday evenings. Last Friday, he talked a lot about his ideas, worldviews, and things that he finds dear. This week also, he will speak about a number of things that are of relevance to us in our daily lives as well as in spiritual lives. And today, we have a bonus. Today, we have with us Dr. Valentina Onisor. Now, Dr. Onisor has been a partner of Dr. Goswami's work for a very long time. And she is a medical doctor, MD. She has elaborate knowledge of various disciplines of healings, not only medicine or per se that we call them. She is a truly integrated healer, and she has done a number of workshops with Dr. Goswami all over the world, be it Brazil, India, US, many other countries, many European countries. She has been there, and her work is highly, highly appreciated by the people who came to her workshops. But first, we'll hand this over to Amit and hear what he has to say. Over to Dr. Goswami.
Thank you, Krishna. Hello, everyone. So here we are again talking about quantum physics, and I always feel very inspired when talking about quantum physics. You know, the whole idea of quantum activism came to me um, because quantum physics is giving us wonderful messages, and these messages started almost immediately after quantum physics was formulated properly in the 1920s, 1925, 26 to be exact. Now, that's almost 100 years ago, you know. And why don't people know about quantum physics? So we know about Newton's physics, uh, about determinism, locality, continuity, these things people believe in. Why can't we hear about non-locality, discontinuity? You talk about these things, people would stare back at you. What is he talking about? Well, of course, I agree that people don't exactly hear the term locality either. That's a technical term. But people do agree that communication requires a signal between two people. That is well known, right? Similarly, people do believe that our experiences, movement of material objects, this is continuous. And a lot of people tend to side with the idea that, yeah, our fate is determined. That's called determinism. Movement is determined. Newtonian movement is all determined movement. Ultimately, we have no freedom to choose anything. We are just ornamental experiences happening to a robot. That's the way Newtonian science predicts us to be. Now, how grossly inadequate is that picture of us? Do you think of yourself as a robot with experience? Literally, this is what neuroscientists today write about us as mechanical robots with experience. They cannot explain why experience arises because experience, of course, requires a subject looking at objects, right? That's what experience is about. Has to have a subject pole and an object pole. And Newtonian physics is the physics of objects. Following the tradition, this is what scientists have done. They have now, strangeness of strangeness, adopted the view that there are only objects in the world, and not only that, only material objects. So we are material, mechanical machines. Somehow we have experience, which requires a subject. See the incompleteness? Where is the explanation of the subject? Well, the scientists say, these materialist scientists, they say, subject doesn't need an explanation. It doesn't have any causal power. It's just ornamental. Are you happy now? Of course, you don't believe it. So, what happens with this kind of science? Science has lost credibility. I was one of those scientists myself, but when I was beginning to emancipate myself from this strangled hold of this idea of material monism, matter is everything, during those times, I would have a very open mind. I went back to the true spirit of science to look for truth. Okay, what is it? Are we really material machines or what is it? And of course, I noticed quantum physics is not agreeing with that because quantum physics has stuff in it which material objects cannot do. And this is why non locality is to be emphasized again and again and again. Discontinuity has to be emphasized again and again and again. Although, agreed, these concepts are a little bit far from people's everyday experience. But why do they have to be emphasized again and again? Because quantum physics says so, and experimentally, these ideas have been verified. Verified. The idea of discontinuity was verified almost right away, even before quantum physics was properly formulated. 1913, can you believe it? So when movement can be discontinuous, where is Newtonian physics? It got to be thrown away. Or one has to admit at least that Newtonian physics works only as a limiting case of quantum physics. Right? The worldview cannot be based on Newtonian physics. How I view the world, now that discontinuity is possible, has to change. When uncertainty is what rules the world, determinism does not hold, then possibility of free will has to be admitted. And all these things, especially because I have a big, big loophole in comparing my experience with physics, Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics is the physics of objects and can never give us answers about how my subjecthood, how my consciousness can arise. And this is the very wonderful thing about quantum physics. When we really looked at non-locality, signal-less communication, let me define it. Signal-less communication. Initially, it was rejected because Einstein, who was one of the propounders of the idea, he thought that this is not compatible with experimental data. He was thinking only one model, one domain of reality, just space and time. In space and time, there is a theory called relativity, which Einstein himself discovered, and that holds. So to Einstein's mind, quantum physics got to be incomplete as well, just as Newtonian physics is incomplete. But later, of course, we verified non-locality, and now the rationale becomes very simple. Rationale was that quantum objects are objects that reside in a different domain of reality, in a domain outside of space and time. We now call it domain of potentiality. These objects are potential objects. They're waves of possibility. And then the question arose, how do the waves of possibility becomes actualized in our experience? How do our experiences arise from this domain of potentiality? This is the question. And things started changing. It's obvious that nothing can happen without a cause. That's the basis of science. Causality can never be given up. This relationship of cause and effect, that can never be given up, and still we cannot say we are doing science. Science is to establish cause for every event. But what cause can you give it for changing waves of possibility into particles of actuality? And then came a wonderful theorem by this mathematician, John von Neumann. who discovered computer, by the way, absolutely one of the greatest scientists of all times. He came up with the wonderful idea that, look, he proved, in fact, mathematically, he proved this idea that material interactions cannot convert webs of possibility into particles of actuality. Material interactions cannot just do the job of converting webs of possibility into particles of actuality. Hear me right. Matter cannot do it. There has to be causation that coming from non-matter. And von Neumann was the first to suggest it's coming from the observer's consciousness. There was some incompleteness in his conceptualization also, because the mistake is very easy to make that we, individual observer, that is what making the choice between the different facets of a possibility wave. Possibility means different facets, right? Out one facet, consciousness chooses, observer chooses, he thought, and that facet becomes actuality. So electron is spread over all over the space, but when an observer looks, he chooses one of the positions only, and the electron shows up in that position. That was the idea. But that idea could be easily negated by saying, suppose there are two observers who's observing the same electron, and they have different wishes. One chooses one position, another chooses another position. Then what? What criterion do we use to single out, okay, this observer is what counts? And that was the problem that I solved in 1985 and published scientific paper in 1989, and then wrote a book which has become a classic, The Self-Aware Universe. That is the story of how consciousness entered physics. I was not alone. Henry Stapp, another physicist, he also likewise wrote a book called Mind, Matter, and Quantum Physics. And Casey Blood, a Rutgers physicist, he also supported the same theory around the same time, published his book a little later, 2001. And then there are many others. There was an Australian, Ludwig Buss. He was instrumental to also point out that there is a consciousness solution to avoid the paradox of von Neumann's individual consciousness idea. So you see how consciousness collapsing quantum waves of possibility. Collapsing means converting quantum waves of possibility into actual event, becomes a cogent idea. Consciousness has causal power. We have free will. We come from that same consciousness. In the process of quantum measurement, consciousness splits up into the observer consciousness, and the objects in the experience of the observer. This is the total story. But this consciousness is the non-local domain of potentiality. Non-locality is one of the potentialities of this domain. Don't miss that. What does that mean? If two objects communicate instantly without signals, that's what without signal means. Signal is the time delay. Signals what causes locality. Signals going through space a little bit at a time. If you don't have any signal, you don't need all that. But what does that mean? You are communicating with yourself. The two objects have become one. And this is such a wonderful thing to discover or rediscover. Because with materialist science coming along, how many times have you heard that religions are humbug, spirituality is humbug, there's no such thing as values, there's no such thing as love? How many times have you been told that? All false. False news. False news did not start 4 years ago. It started long ago, and science participated in it very sadly with this idea of matter is everything, violating even the simplest sense, simplest observation that every one of us has, namely that we are also a subject to our experience. Yes, the amount of subjecthood that we have become compromised when we are conditioned, when we don't feel, when we don't intuit, we don't connect to non-local consciousness very well in our thinking mind, in our rationality when we overdo it. Rationality has its place, but so does feeling, emotions. But fortunately, of course, we have two sexes. Men are more into rationality. Women, fortunately, have women's values, and we are very optimistically aware how women's values are changing the society everywhere. Women's values have this position of the heart. Heart is so important. Heart conserves that non-locality. Non-locality of consciousness is so easy to experience when your heart opens. Okay? So quantum science can do all that. A science based on quantum physics brings in non-locality, explains heart, feelings, explains love. Love is when you expand your consciousness with non-locality and communicate with another without making that person into an object for your pleasure. Can you imagine the impact of this knowledge in our workplace where women have to constantly watch about being harassed? Can you imagine? Why do we harass men? I'm talking about we men. Why do we harass women for sexual favors? Because we objectify them. They're just objects to satisfy my pleasure. No woman wants that. Nobody wants that. If you're a man on the other side of it, you wouldn't want that either. That's where love comes in. Love allows us to see the other as a subject. Because I am being non-local with this person, I see her or him as one, as a subject. And then I cannot be disrespectful to this person and violate her privacy by harassment. Anybody who harasses are a complete violator of science, reality, being, but not materialist science. That's the problem. Materialist science have caused these aberrations. Now, mind you, don't think that materialist science is all wrong. Please, materialist science in its proper domain is very useful. It has given us wonderful descriptions of atoms, molecules, inanimate objects. As soon as living objects enter, as soon as that happens, that's when materialist science fails. Molecules cannot generate life by itself. Consciousness needs to come in. We apply new science, we can explain what life is. We can explain the energies that come with being alive, the energies that we call vitality. And of course, thinking. We don't have to go to computers for thinking. Can computers replace human mind? No. Computers process information. So long as we have made our mind as information processor, then we become computer-like. So the model holds to a certain extent. In fact, a lot of people today, as you know, they are into information processing. Psychologists call them dumbed down for that reason, because they have lost the power of the mind, which is to process meaning. So, what is the lesson for you in all this? Learning to love, learning to process meaning, and then I'll throw in the other big thing that quantum physics allows us to do. See, in materialist science, there is only sensory information. But a very large number of people today experience extrasensory communication, and not just the paranormal, like telepathy or distant viewing. Not just that. They experience intuition, they experience spirituality. These are also extrasensory communication. In fact, love itself, that non-locality, that caring that comes with that non-locality, with that expansion of consciousness, that feeling in the heart, I love this person, that feeling that you experience when you are young as heartthrob, that feeling is coming from intuition, archetype of love. These objects are called archetype. Plato gave the name, and it's a marvelous name to adopt. That's what we intuit. And when we really investigate the object, we have creative insights about the archetype. Our society is built on that. The Constitution, democracy, all these ideas, they came from these intuitions. How do you think people figured out all people are created equal? The first thing that American Constitution says, which is the oldest democratic constitution in the world, that is now suffering a little bit of turmoil, but it will pass. People are not going to give up on democracy. Why? Because we all intuit that there is fundamental truth in these ideas. All people are created equal. There's fundamental truth that we should leave people alone in their pursuit of happiness, which is expansion of consciousness. We know. And finally, we have a science, quantum science, that is acknowledging that knowledge. Now, of course, it is also important, what are we doing about this? This is the question that, I was talking in Brazil, this was many years ago. I was talking in Brazil about these ideas, and a young man, just a 21-year-old, he asked me a fantastic question. So what is the experimental evidence for all this? So I was telling him the evidence, two people communicate because they meditate, they communicate in the physical even. Brain waves from one subject can be transferred into another subject without an electrical connection. Maybe in the future, I will go through this experiment with you, proving non-locality of brains. So there is experimental data. I told this young man, look, there is experimental data. I will share them with you. The question is longer, that is there experiment suggesting that our consciousness is non-local, we have this capacity to love. The question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? So in my mind, that question by the young man gave me the idea of quantum activism. Because the materialists are hiding these knowledges. Well, okay, the academics know that, but they are not taking the lessons. In 1982, this great discovery was done in physics. Alan Aspect, he discovered that yes, two objects communicate experimentally, demonstrated that two objects can communicate instantly and become one. Of course, there is many huge resistance in the physics community because people have become believers of materialism already. And matter cannot do this. Matter cannot have this non-locality. So one physicist was complaining to the other. One who does not listen to the message of a space experiment, this non-locality experiment, got to have rock in his head. But unfortunately, that rock is not only this one physicist's head, it has gotten into the head of many, 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 many intelligent people around the world. No wonder that a large number of people in America and elsewhere, they reject this intelligentsia for telling them lies. Of course, their answer also is equally wrong, because the answer to lies is not more lies. Answer to lies is discovery of truth. Without truth, we cannot do science. Without truth, we cannot run a society. Truth has to come back. And because truth is not coming back by itself, we have to do something about it. We have to bring in quantum science and archetypes. The first archetype, the major archetype, is truth, of course. We have to bring them back in our society, in our education. So what am I doing to do about it? I founded the movement of quantum activism. Now we have that going on in 5 continents. And with your help, we have now started a University of Transformational Education, where people will discover truth, people will discover love. We are offering master's and PhD in health, prosperity, and happiness. In conventional terms, medical science, health and healing, business and economics, and psychology. Health, prosperity, and happiness. Psychology is a science of happiness to us, not about just mental disease. And to talk about all this, I now introduce you Valentina Onisar. Valentina has been working with me on these questions for years now. And he's such a wonderful person. You know, we complement each other. Yes, I have discovered feelings, emotions, I know the heart, but she speaks of the heart. She speaks from the heart, spontaneously. A woman. Men, I was intellectual for so long, that habit continues. But this woman is both in her intellect and also in her heart. So let her speak and explain the curriculum that we have. Please. Valentina Arnisar, MD, but also expert in homeopathy, naturopathy, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, psychology. She is as universal in terms of her fields as I am. Valentina Arnisar. All for you, Valentina. Pick it up.
Thank you, Professor Goswami. So I will round up a little bit the subjects of the necessity of integrating the science with the spirituality and the bridge that the quantum science is bringing. You know, actually, this was the fact which brought me like a magnet towards Professor Goswami and towards quantum science. You know, and I'm sure many of you are disturbed from this split that you see in the world nowadays between these two areas, and not to mention the other splits and dichotomies that we have. So quantum science of spirituality, again, the metaphysics of matter is replaced by the metaphysics of consciousness, and consciousness is the ground of all being, and all our experience comes from possibilities of consciousness. Again, what we call science is the material science usually, and is not the science that we refer to. And also spirituality is not just the religion part that usually people know of. So why the necessity for higher education? You know, higher education, it was seen long ago in India as the light of knowledge that removes the darkness of ignorance of the base level human condition. Sounds good, right? But if you look around you, education today, you see that is now more about just information processing and job training. And it's not what we want to do. I mean, if we continue in this way, no wonder that people are speaking nowadays so much about bringing robots instead of people, right? So really think about the meanings, like bringing the meanings and the values of being human is not anymore an option. So again, what we are usually trained in education system is that one has to survive and one has to have a job, and that's why, so you satisfy the fact that we are social cultural beings, and that's all. And that's what the so-called education is about today, everywhere. And the human societies, as I said, is dangerously moving towards the emphasis of survival needs, ignoring the higher needs, which is creating the chaos that we live today. So it is the job of higher education to restore the pursuit of higher needs and ensure the continuation of higher purpose of human development. And to get out of this shackles that I'll just mention some of the things about the human condition, we need transformational education. Education that will transform the human condition into more positive stations of homeostasis. And that means stations of more health, more prosperity, more happiness. That's why we put the title of our course in this way. And this will accomplish not just by learning what the quantum worldview has to say, and but also applying it in our life accordingly to wherever we are, and changing the society so that we can make a living without compromising our worldview and the way we live in, right? So I'm very fond of the Hindu tradition. I've been studying it and practicing it for about 30 years now. And the Vedic tradition did recognize that not all people are prepared enough to explore value education. All right. And higher education in this Indian tradition was really for people who wanted to satisfy their higher needs, to explore creativity, how to be ethical, how to be fair to others and bring justice to the world, how to heal themselves and the world, how to, even poetry and music, or even explore people who are exploring the truth, including the truth about us, ultimately, who am I? And there was even a higher education that was teaching us how to progressively reach higher and higher states of wholeness and happiness, Ananda in Sanskrit. So the wisdom tradition, similar in spirit to the original version of India, albeit not so elaborate, were discovered and developed in other places as well, in Greece, in China, in the Middle East. And one shortcoming of the higher or lower division of education was the denigration of the world. So nevertheless, it is this kind of higher education that has given us what we call civilization. And obviously it had the transformative power over people and society that enabled humanity to overcome the limits of the base level condition, right? But like in every civilization, also the India civilization and other parts of the world had the same history of ascent and then descent. And the archetypal values under what became later religious dogma became more like doctrines to practice, not ideas to explore or discover and then practice, right? And these limitations and others produce less success in the embodiment of the values, okay? And pretension, hypocrisy, all that became common. And gradually even further corruption entered due to the unaddressed limitations of the base level human condition, no doubt. So you see, nowadays people don't really know what is the richness, like what means to be rich, and actually to be educated and to become aware of your condition, whatever is that. It's the first place to start with, and it's a lot of richness there. Human beings without education suffer from a base level human condition that keeps us at a level quite close to the machines that I talked about, and even close to the animal ancestry. And higher education is education human values that elevate us beyond this base level condition. And as a result, the society becomes civilized, and lower education is then needed to pick up the survival skills to live in a civilized society and appreciate the civilization. So recently, the higher education that you see became all lower education now. Many educators have forgotten what the purpose of education is. Lower and higher, what being a human is about, and what the meaning and purpose of human life and consciousness, of human values, of education, higher education, civilization is eventually. So, and this happened because of the ways, the myopic ways that we look at ourselves and the world today, our worldview. Yeah. So the world crisis is all over us, and now you see this much easier than ever, right? One crisis or another, whether it's a a virus, then there appears another virus and another crisis, yeah? And manipulation and all that. Of all the crises, still the root crisis is education, or rather the lack of education. And materialist scientists, as Professor Goswami was saying, they are now openly saying something which is truly disastrous and untrue. And they are saying that we are doomed to our base level human condition because there's nothing else. And being civilized is nothing but being pretentious, being politically correct. The responsibility of being a good teacher go hand in hand with being a good doctor as well, and a good person. And it implies something which is called continuous transformation. And this holds an evolutionary key towards health, growth, and transformation. So again, of course, a good teacher who lives what he or she teaches the same way as a good doctor, which is practicing medicine in a way that he is getting himself healed together with his patients, right? So these persons, they will not transform anybody, nobody can transform somebody, but they can hold a mirror before you, and a mirror in which the image that you see is not just the current you, but what you can be, what is in your potentiality, okay? What is your perfect right to actualize in your being? And then you aspire to transform, you intend to change, and you transform actually. So you got that quantum spark, that inspiration to change. So when you hear the word quantum and quantum science, it's really about the human potential, the fact that we have it and we can develop it, and we need to do it actually. So in this environment and in the face of the perpetual environmental challenges that human beings have to face, the meaning and purpose questions that motivate us towards higher education have receded to the background. But again, fortunately, there is this quantum science, the new science, which is integrating science and spirituality as well. And we call it quantum science of consciousness, which restores human values and higher education with more meaning and power than it ever had in lifting us from the limiting base level existence. Now, about that base level human condition, so since the dawn of civilization, we have also recognized that we have certain built-in tendencies, right? And I'll just share with you the main 4 ones, which we speak about in the quantum science. So the first one is the me-centeredness. While engaging in any action, we have the tendency to ask, what is it in it for me? So this tendency is also called selfishness, okay? Then the second one is the negative emotion, and we are particularly prone to react to certain stimuli with negative emotions such as anger, violence, jealousy, domination, competitiveness, especially domination, you need to look into that. And then third, pleasure. We have a tendency to engage in certain activities such as eating and just having sex, not making love, which just brings us a certain pleasure. And fourth, ignorance. We have a tendency to maintain the status quo, for not to engage with anything new, including new meaning. All right. So given these tendencies, how did humans attain civilization, even to the degree that we see today? Okay, so you have to check the history. There were always people who not only overcame these base level conditions for themselves, but also they created systems called education to lift people up. Yeah, and how they did that, of course, we are receiving knowledge about how things really are. And in this way, traditionally, education is regarded as the removal of ignorance via knowledge. Okay, but how do we get knowledge? So the illuminate people, they said via consciousness, and we are conscious beings in spite of this me-centeredness. So in fact, all of us come from a consciousness that is the ground of all being, the oneness. And this oneness has attributes, virtues that we value. And because we are that, we too can intuit these virtues. Okay, so it is hard work, but we can, and we have to do it and discover these virtues for ourselves and explore, discover, embody the virtues. We see this as a purpose of human life. All right, so contrary, usually in spirituality, you see this current that people are going towards the ultimate target, which is the quantum self, right? So in the quantum science, we are speaking about wholeness. So we go towards wholeness in this way to embody this virtue, to bring in these godly attributes of that oneness, which is, yeah? So not running away from the society, but instead, again, really bringing that, what is called heaven on earth, okay? So the virtues or the archetypes, okay, the realm of higher intuitions, higher thinking, highest feeling, they were codified. And today we call them archetypes, which is a word used by many and by Plato, first of all. So I will just name the 9 that we speak about mainly in the quantum science, and they are abundance, power, love, goodness, truth, beauty, justice, wholeness, and self. And as I said before, speaking of a good teacher or a good doctor, the first thing that is needed is that inspiration to open towards that non-locality. And the main gate for non-locality is, of course, the heart. So higher education, again, must include not only the physical and mechanical side of the human being, yeah, so not just the hard sciences, physics and chemistry, technology, biotech, but also the non-physical and creative side of the human, which is the soft sciences, the conscious side of biology, health sciences, psychology, economics, and even business, yeah. And there needs to be an attitude change from lower needs to a balance of lower and higher needs, right? A balance of the tendency to remain in conditioning and the tendency for creativity. So to reflect to this attitude and change in higher education, free of our educational pursuits must undergo radical change. First of all, the health science must restrain its current preoccupation with disease and cure, and morph into a science of health and well-being, disease prevention and healing, all in the pursuit of wholeness. Okay. Then the psychology and psychiatry must give up the preoccupation with mental disease and pleasure and its abuses and morph into a science of happiness. Economics must give up its preoccupation with material wealth and morph into a science of prosperity in the pursuit of the archetype of abundance. So the integration of science with the wisdom traditions should restore the credibility of science as well. And this new science, being a science of consciousness, expands the 2 prongs, theory and experiment, of traditional science into 3 prongs, theory, experiment, and experience. So in practical terms, materialist science remains intact under the new science in the fields of the hard sciences dealing with the non-living. Physics, chemistry, engineering, etc., is the science of the domain of the living that gets the revisioning. Okay. Also, the quantum science brings the science of manifestation. You heard about this. You heard about The Secret, and it's much, much more than you heard in that movie, right? You'll discover all the secrets of which was not mentioned in The Secret studying with us. So the manifestation, science of manifestation does not work for manifesting pleasure toys, if that's what you're interested in. But the science works wonder with manifesting health, prosperity, and happiness once you get the new perspective. So, and yes, this is part and parcel of the quantum education, how to live your quantum way of thinking, how to manifest meanings and values in your life, including health, prosperity, and happiness, right? So, quantum science is teaching us how to think, how to live, how to earn a living that synchronizes with how you think and live. And it will show you how to be healthy, prosperous, and happy, and enabling you to help others to do the same. But as you know, you are not transforming the world only, first of all, after you transform yourself. Okay, so just to mention some of the features of the higher education. Okay, one, of course, consciousness. People are conscious, they can distinguish themselves from the environment as having a self, separate from the objects of the environment in their experience. Then meaning, you heard this word and you will hear it again and again. This self-aware of itself can process meaning and can discern darkness and light, ignorance and wisdom, can discern ambiguity of meaning and distinguish between real meaning and organized meaning or information. Then we have purpose. Meaning processing is not only a causal response, but also a purposive response. Then we speak about free will. The self can choose to respond to the light of knowledge rather than staying in ignorance. Then creativity. The self is creative. When called for and challenged by the experience of light, it responds in a new way, using creativity rather than stay in the known conditioned state of ignorance. 6. Hierarchy of needs. Given that his or her base level need is already fulfilled in the ignorant state, opting for creative change implies that the human needs must extend beyond survival, that there is a whole hierarchy of needs that only progressive education can satisfy. Higher needs like love, truth, beauty, goodness, justice, and wholeness. And 7, the archetypes. So where does the stimuli for the higher needs come from? It comes from the consciousness in the form of stimuli called archetypes, right? And you heard about them in many ways. So the transformation education in the quantum style consists of 3 interdependent tracks. So first is learning how to think, otherwise worldview, learning how to live in congruence with and using the quantum worldview. And this involves some intellectual, but mostly experiential practice and creativity-oriented education. And then number 3 is learning how to scale the ladder of happiness from neuroses to normal to positive to enlightened states of being. Then learning the quantum science way of how our social systems should work. And this means learning quantum science of health and healing, quantum science of building prosperity for ourselves and for our society, and the quantum science of child development, and the quantum science of happiness. The quantum science of prosperity involves many facets. The quantum science of economics, business, okay, and business, a lot of business things, and politics, and ethics, and morality, social justice. Then learning how to engage in a profession in the quantum way, learn how to lead the rest of the society towards quantum thinking, living, and earning livelihood, and learn how to contribute to the evolution of consciousness, right? So we are supplementing the 3 R's that you encounter in the common education, reading, writing, arithmetics. So with the 7 I's. Okay. And mainly, I will briefly, you can speak of the 3 of the 7 I's, so which is inspiration, imagination, intuition. We'll start with this. So inspiration is like injecting consciousness and quantum self, expanded consciousness, and archetypes and feelings, to make room for curiosity and passion and inclusivity. Education is not an individual thing anymore. And the reason I'm in the school with others is not only so I learn social skills, but also I learn cooperatively, not competitively. Okay. Then second is imagination. So the logical learning of the 3 R's contracts consciousness when we process with thinking. And imagination without bounds of strict logic liberates us. This creates an opening for the next I, which is intuition. And this facility is almost forgotten now, and it's essential to bring it back to lift the young people from ignorance to wisdom eventually. And of course, again, the teacher training is very important. Teachers who walk their talk and who are transformed with quantum higher education. That's what is needed. All right. So what we do, we are inviting you to the discomfort of making changes in the way you think and the way you live. And the quantum leader is asking you to make years of commitment to devote to transformational education. Also, it's inspiring you to have the courage to take the risk. And indeed, the leader itself, herself or himself, has to have these qualities. Right? Amit?
Oh, hi, Valentina. It was really nice. So you all heard. By the way, she called Amit. I came on the line. I did not have any name change recently in the last 1 hour. My name is still Prashanu. And however, I would like to give the finishing touches to this presentation. Thank you, Valentina. It has been a very nice way of describing the archetypes and how we are looking at education. Now, why our education is different is more or less described by Valentina, to some extent by Dr. Goswami. What I would like to add here is that the difference is all about the experience. The experience part is very, very important, because then a person, when the experience takes over, makes the beginning of transformation. Now, most of us are even not aware that we can be transformed to a much more greater being. But the moment you have that experience that, yes, I can be or I am much more that I am currently displaying, the seeds of transformation just got a fillip. Now, in this course, we have a master's degree as well as a PhD degree. People who are bachelors in any subject, bachelor degree holders in any subject, can apply for the master's degree, and the existing master's degree holders can apply for a PhD degree. We have a tie-up with the University of Technology in Jaipur, India, and through that university, we are giving fully accredited master's degree and PhD recognized by the University Grants Commission of India, which is the right authority to give degrees. And this is a very flexible course. It is done mostly online because of the coronavirus issue. This year, in entire 2021, it will be completely online through webinars, through video courses, and through interactions on digital media, emails. This course will be given. That's the reason it offers a lot of flexibility. People can do it anytime. And not only master's degree and PhD, we also have a certification course for 1 year. So there are people who may not need a degree today, who may just need to understand the subject, go deep into it, experience it for himself or herself, or even use that knowledge in some workshop of their own. They can go for a certificate course. Now, the certificate course is for 1 year. And the most beautiful part of this is that you can take courses in a modular way. So there is no strong, stringent rule that you'll have to do two after you do one. So that way, it gives you even more flexibility. Please visit our website www.amitgoswami.org. You will find all this information there. And if you go to the QAV tab, you will find the information about masters and PhD, what courses are there. And more importantly, you have to understand that this is one of the most affordable degree courses of this kind offered in the world. Still, you might have queries. You might want to know more about us. You might have specific questions. And I strongly urge you that you email us at info@amitgoswami.org. We will reply to you as soon as possible. We believe in quick responses. We believe in creating good experience for our students. We believe everything that can be done at the best level, at the better level, is what we are up to. So come, visit our website, contact us, and see this can open a new opportunity for you. Thank you so much. We will be back again next Friday at the same time, 7:30 p.m. IST, with another edition. See you till then.